I was diagnosed with dilated cardiomyopathy, which basically meant that the left ventricle of my heart was too big.
She first had problems at about 7 weeks. She was termed a failure to thrive, was very sick, but it took another 7 weeks before they diagnosed her with dilated cardiomyopathy.
The reaction I had initially was one of complete shock.
I think it affected her physically more than anything. She couldn't run, she couldn't climb, she was very blue, very clammy, very, very sick. So it was all those kind of things that physically held her back.
She kind of grew with her condition, so she kind of set her own boundaries, which was really good in many ways, but was also disappointing when you saw her friends running around the park and she just couldn't join in.
Growing up, I always felt a bit different to my friends.
She struggled to set into a group of friends solidly in like first school because she missed so much time and she was only there like half days.
I think the condition did limit me to a certain extent just because I couldn't have the sense of independence that Chloe had sort of growing up. My parents were always a little more protective over me, naturally I think. Like I've always felt different to my sister in terms of that.
It was probably really difficult for her, and that's what I think has brought us closer recently, because getting older I've realised that more.
She herself made it easier for us as parents because she was always happy and she was always accepting of it, and she just got on with life. So as parents you're kind of obliged to do the same.
It did start to get worse, which to be fair they had told us there was no cure. So we knew that at some point it would catch up with us.
It started to deteriorate at the start of 2011. I went to a routine check-up appointment and they said things didn't look quite as good as they had before. So I got diagnosed with a secondary condition called pulmonary hypertension, which meant that because the left side of my heart had become so weak, the right side was trying to work twice as hard to compensate. And as it was pumping blood to the lungs, some of the blood was staying there, so the pressures were rising like dangerously high. I was on intensive care, sedated, on a ventilator. They brought me around the next day and I was taken up to the ward, and one of the doctors came around and sat on the bed and said to me, "We may need to start thinking about having a heart transplant." I just broke down crying to my parents because as much as I'd known my whole life that I would need one day, it still came as such a shock to be told that I would. And I was sort of like, I'm only 14, like why do I have to worry about this now when I should be worrying about homework and school and stuff?
Here we are at last, after 14 years, we're here, and it was like, oh no, what's going to happen now? It was like, this is a whole new world. So scary, your life changed there and then.
I remember when Dad first told me that Ella needed a heart transplant, and it was possibly the most terrifying moment of my life. I remember not going into school the next day because as much as we always knew she would need a transplant, it didn't feel real until that moment, because it just felt like, oh, that's far off in the future, like we don't need to worry about that yet. And suddenly it was like, no, we need to think about it right now.
One of the Great Ormond Street doctors came to Norfolk and Norwich, as he does sometimes, and so my parents got invited to talk to him about it, just to ask all the questions they wanted to ask. I was allowed to go as well, but I decided not to just because I was struggling to deal with it all at the time. So I wrote down a few questions that I wanted to know the answers to, and one of them that I remember is how long would I have left if I didn't have one? So they came back from that meeting and he said 2 years at best. So that was for me when I thought, I don't want to die at 16. I came home and I said to my parents, can I have one more weekend not on the list so I don't have to think about this?
So we went to Centre Parks and we had such a really great time. It was quite surreal because she was well in herself.
And to see and to be with, she seemed absolutely fine. You wouldn't have known that she was essentially dying.
I still think back to that weekend now.
When I came back that Monday, that was when I was officially on the waiting list.
Obviously during that time you're like telling people not to text you, you know, don't get in touch because we're waiting for the call, which we were told could take up to 3 months.
4 days later at 3 in the morning, my mum got the phone call to say they'd found me a heart. So she came downstairs and woke me up and she said, "Ella, they've got a heart for you, it's time to go." And I turned over and I said, "No, I'm not ready for this one, I don't want this one." Obviously they got me up anyway, but I just remember I was in the ambulance and I looked back and just waved to my nan and sister, not knowing if I'd ever see them again.
Waving goodbye to the ambulance when she left in the middle of the night was absolutely terrifying. I can't even explain.
I think it was about 6 hours from getting there to going down to theatre. I got on the bed and my mum got on with me and they wheeled me down to theatre and put me to sleep. Yeah, and that's when I had the transplant.
It was the waiting to hear what had happened that was the hardest, and I remember being on the phone to Mum and she told me that the doctors had told her that it took like a duct of water, and hearing that was like, you could breathe again. Like, it wasn't over, but like it was going well, and that was like enough at that point to be like, okay, like she's gonna be fine.
The new heart had taken to me really well. I actually felt it beating and I was a bit worried about that because with my old heart it was so weak, so I'd never experienced anything like that.
Before she was blue and clammy and you go into intensive care and she's pink. and all the transplant mums say the same.
Yeah, they said I'd be in hospital for about 3 months, and I was out of hospital and home in 2 weeks, which shocked everyone. So it's coming up to 6 years since my transplant this year.
I have seen a massive change in Ella both physically and mentally since her heart transplant.
I've got so much more independence now. My parents aren't so protective over me anymore.
Ella's definitely come out of her shell more, and she wants to do more.
She's so much more confident in herself. She is so much more outgoing, and she wants to experience things and live life to the fullest.
I'm really close with my sister, so we go out and do all sorts of stuff now that I wouldn't have been able to do before.
Ella's transplant massively affected my relationship with her. It brought us so much closer, I can't even explain it. We were sisters, whereas now she is my best friend. It's nice that we can spend more time together now because you've come out of your shell so much more.
Yeah, I can get involved in more.
Yeah. Do you think
Have more fun!
Do you think that is because of your transplant?
Yeah, definitely. I'm just more free, aren't I?
More free.
To do more things.
It's nice that you get involved in more and you're more confident. More confident.
More confident, yeah, and it's definitely like, I think that's why we've come closer, because we're able to do so much more together. Now, I feel like a completely different person.
You can't really put it into words, the difference it's made to her life.
Cycles all the time, she's been swimming, she's done sponsored walks and cycle rides to raise money, and none of this without a donor would have been possible.
Since my transplant, Norwich City Football Club has become a big part of my life. I do a lot of travelling up and down the country to watch them away, and I've got a season ticket. I never really went to the games when I was ill because it's quite a full-on environment.
Me and Ella, we got our football love together, and I just love going to the matches with her, and we look forward to our days away together, win, lose or draw, and I cherish every one of them.
Now off down to watch Norwich against Derby. 9 games unbeaten, let's make it 10. Come on, you yellows!
Also, since my transplant, I've decided that I wanted to raise money for Great Ormond Street Hospital to help thank them for what they've done for me. I done my first event 3 months after my transplant, and we raised £1,600 at that, and since then I've just continued fundraising. We've raised almost £11,000 since my transplant for Great Ormond Street, and we'll continue to keep doing that.
It's given her the opportunity to really do some incredible things.
She's really flourishing now.
So in December this year I'll be turning 21, which is something that me or my parents never thought they would see.
To now be planning things for her 21st birthday is incredible, and it just really makes you realise how lucky you are and how important organ donation is.
I remember having a conversation once saying if we get her to her teenage years we'd have done brilliantly, and now she's on the brink of 21.
So it's changed her life. Well, it's given her a life.
If you decide to donate your organs, you essentially become a hero to someone you've never even met.
It's an incredible thing to leave your legacy behind and let someone else live on with your organs.
If you would accept one for someone you love, why wouldn't you give one?
Have the discussion with your family and make sure your wishes are known.
My donor is and always will be my hero for saving me and enabling me to stay here with my family. It really is the most amazing thing you'll ever do.